It's time for the quarterly with Yummy Signs.
Episode 5, The Change is Forever. My time had finally come to leave on my journey to Parris Island, South Carolina. I was scheduled to leave and start my training on September 4th of 1995. By this time, I was already living in El Paso, Texas with my parents, and the plan was to leave my girlfriend there with my daughter while I was out there completing all my training. Now, back then, of course, my parents were not going to fork up the money to get me a flight to get me back to Kentucky. So the next best thing was for me to get a ticket to ride the Greyhound to go out there to meet up with the recruiter and actually fly out to head out to Parris Island for my recruit training. So I got my ticket. My dad dropped me off out there at the Greyhound station in El Paso, and I got on my bus. So I was about to set out on a 23-hour journey that I was going to take me 2 days because all the stops that I would have to make on the way, because as you know, the Greyhound stops everywhere and people get on, people get off. I must say, for an 18-year-old, it was quite an adventure. You never know what kind of people you're going to see on those buses. Once I left El Paso, the next stop that we made was in Dallas, Texas. Now, as soon as we got there, it was kind of weird because there was police waiting out there to the lane where the bus was actually pulling into. All of a sudden, one of the police officers got on the bus and he tells us all to get off the bus, and he escorted a young couple that was sitting about a couple seats in front of me and set them to the side of everybody else. I guess they must have received some kind of tip or something that they had some illegal stuff on them and they were about to bust them. Okay, they pulled all of our bags from the bottom of the bus, and they ended up having 3 large duffel bags that their actual canine that they had with them alerted to, and then they arrested this young couple. Who knows what they had in those bags? But I'm assuming, it could have been marijuana, could have been something else. But somebody obviously gave him a tip and all that stuff, and they were able to actually catch them there in Dallas. Okay, so let's fast forward a couple of hours. About 20 some hours, okay? So I finally arrived in Kentucky. Where I ended up at was in Elizabethtown, where my best friend's parents were there to actually pick me up. And I was going to stay with them for a couple of days until it was actually my time to actually ship out and head out there to the island. Now, on the morning of September 4th, that's when my journey actually began. Okay, once again, I was dropped off there at the Howard Johnson's to get ready to head out to the airport. Our first stop was actually at the MEP station to get our paperwork, our packets, and everything else that we were going to need to be able to turn in once we actually arrived there on board the island. There were about 5 of us that were leaving at the same time down there from our recruiting station. As most of you know, you spend the whole day pretty much there at MEPS getting any final paperwork done, any last minute questions or anything that needs to be done. Finally, they took us out there to the airport. Of course, it was a late flight. I guess they get cheaper flights that way to fly everybody down there to Parris Island. At least that's what I thought back then anyway. So it was late. Our flight took off there from Louisville, Kentucky, and we finally landed in South Carolina. It was about 11 p.m. at night. So it was dark outside. It was already there, kind of tired already because being a nasty little civilian back then, I was used to going to sleep kind of early. Now, we were taken to this room that they had set aside where they had pretty much all the poolies that were arriving there on the flights throughout the day. They would put them there and have us all wait for our next part of our adventure. There was a young sergeant there, a young Marine. He gave us a little bag nasty that had hoagies to eat in there. That was my first experience with those nasty hoagies that I didn't know that I was going to pretty much have for the rest of my career that I was going to be in the service. Now, he told us, make sure that you eat this because you do not know when the next time will be that you actually get something to eat. That was about an hour or so later. A bus pulled up to the door that was right there to the side of where we were being held at. Now, by then, there was more people that had arrived there on different flights. So we had about a total about 80 of us that were there getting ready to get on the bus. So we went ahead, got on the bus and everything. And it was an eerie feeling that, you kind of feel when you get on that iconic bus that you have an idea that you're finally going to go to the island. What I thought about how many people before me had actually made the same trip, how many people had gotten on this bus and they changed their life forever. Back then, I thought we were being taken out to the middle of nowhere because we were on that bus for about 3 hours. As I started getting tired, I dozed off. And, little did I know, I had no idea back then that the bus driver was actually driving us around in circles, going back and forth, just making the time go by to make us think that we were going so far away from the airport. And so we had no idea where we were actually going. And we started going down this long road and everything. It was dark. It was quiet. There really was nothing there. And, I dozed off. So I fell asleep. I raised my head because I kind of felt the bus slow down a little bit. As I looked up, that's when I saw it. I was looking at the main gate there at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island. I saw the huge ego-globin anger that was there at the gate. The bus kind of slowed down and everything else. The sentry there at the gate waved the bus in. I can't really explain the feeling, that I felt in my gut. I was pretty sure that I wasn't the only one that felt the exact same way. Later on throughout the years, I realized that I wasn't the only one that kind of felt the same way. Almost everybody that goes through those gates, once they get there aboard parasailing, gets that feeling. The feeling of, what the heck am I doing here? What have I gotten myself into? Now, about 5 minutes later, after the bus actually went through the gate, the bus came to an actual slow stop. All I heard was psst, as the driver came to a stop, and then slowly the door came open. Now, once the bus came to that stop, that's when I saw it. The iconic campaign cover. It was a drill instructor that was coming up the stairs, and it looked like he was moving in super slow motion. He gets to the top of the stairs, kind of holding his head down and everything else. Then all of a sudden he looks up. The next thing that I heard was,
"You are now aboard Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parasailing, South Carolina, and you have just taken the first step towards becoming a member of the world's finest fighting force, the United States Marine Corps. Tens of thousands of Marines began outstanding service to our country on the very footprints where you're standing. You will carry their proud tradition."
So then he had us there on the iconic yellow footprints. Unless you stood there on these yellow footprints, you really don't understand what the meaning of it is. But obviously, all of you that are here, that join me here every single week, all of you are Marines. So you have an understanding. You know what it feels like to actually stand on those footprints, to know where your journey actually started. Right then and there, when you hear those words, when you're standing there on those yellow footprints. He then moved us a little bit closer, and we were standing in front of these big silver shiny doors with an eagle-globin anchor on each of those doors. Again, he looked at us, he said,
"Eyeballs."
And we looked at him and he said,
"Passing through these hatches symbolizes your transformation from a civilian into a United States Marine Corps recruit."
Then we were off. He went ahead and took us inside of there, and we commenced to sitting down in these small chairs that they had set up in this big giant classroom looking thing. And we all sat down there, pretty much there, sitting there just looking straight to the front, not moving and waiting for the next thing that they were going to tell us to do. Now, this was the start of the longest days that I had ever known to this point in my young life. We spent a couple of days there getting everything in order and getting all of our gear that we were going to need in order to be able to start our training that following Friday. Hectic is a word that I can use, but it was beyond hectic. Imagine this, a bunch of young kids, teenagers that don't know anything else, a bunch of little nasty civilians that have no idea what's going on, really don't know the Marine Corps lingo, don't know what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to say, all those things. It gets pretty hectic because as a receiving drill instructor, your job is to actually take those nasty little things, try to teach them a little bit. You're not really teaching them anything because you're just there to process them through the whole entire receiving thing, and they don't know anything. So it's hectic. I mean, you have no idea what you got to do. Now, the one thing that I really remember is that iconic phone call that every Marine Corps recruit has to make once they get there in order for them to let their family know that they had made it there safely to the island. Now, you couldn't just make any regular phone call, as you all know. You can't sit there and cry and whine, mommy this and mommy that. Can't do none of that. What they do is they have some phones that are set up there for you. You line up there, A to B. You know exactly what I mean when I say A to B. They got the phones there, and in front of every single phone, there's a sheet of paper on there that had a script of what you had to say to the person that was on the other side. So as I looked up and I saw that piece of paper, the drill instructor behind us is telling you, read it. So that's what we did. So this is what I sounded like when I picked up the phone. I picked up the phone, I dialed the number, and first thing that I did was look up at the sign, and I was going to remember what I was going to say. "Hello, this is Recruit Signs. I have arrived safely at MCRD Parasailing, South Carolina. The next time I contact you will be by postal mail, so expect a letter in 2 to 3 weeks. I love you and goodbye." I had it memorized. I had that in my mind ready to go. Nobody answered the phone. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So I hung up and I dialed again. I dialed again hoping that, my parents were going to hear the phone ring, because this is the last time that I was actually going to be able to talk to them and tell them anything at all. Even if it was just those couple of words that I was allowed to say. I wanted to talk to somebody. And I had all these recruits that were around me, and they were actually talking to their parents, talking to somebody on the other line that actually, wanted to know that they made it there safely. I must have tried like 2 or 3 times. Nothing. The drill instructor looked at me and said, "Did you talk to anybody?" I said, No, sir. Call again. So I tried one more time. Nobody answered answered the phone. So you have that feeling that you got this person behind you watching you, making that phone call to make sure you only say what you were supposed to say. And like I said, I looked at those and I had it memorized. I knew what I was going to say. I was excited because that was going to be the beginning of what I had to do. But I tried that last final time and nothing happened. Drill instructor again asked me, did anybody answer? And I said, no, sir. He looked at me dead in the eyes and said, oh, well, I guess no one cares. I was like, damn. At that time I was like, man, this guy don't care about me. He's a freaking animal. He's a beast. Then it was off to the little waiting room again. So I sat there just wondering why nobody answered the phone. Why didn't nobody want to talk to me now that I am done? I'm here and I wanted to actually let them know that I made it safely. That's what I wanted to do. So then they took us back to that room there, and then they're like, all right, here's a sheet of paper. You're going to write some stuff down, and they want you to write down a story or whatever. I don't remember exactly what they wanted me to write, but we were sitting there. That room was hot. It was really, really hot. I remember because they put us there, they gave us the stuff to write down, and then they dimmed the lights down, and I guarantee you they had the heater on, because it was no way that it was that hot in that room without them having some kind of a heater on. Then they had this elevator music playing in the background. Man, I was so freaking tired because I had been up for so long already, especially that first night when we first got there. They kept us up for a long time. I found out later that it was because they wanted to deprive us of our sleep, and they wanted to, kind of confuse us, breaking us down from being that nasty little civilian into actually becoming that recruit and, being able to deal with the chaos, anything else that might be thrown at us and everything. So here we are for the next couple of days, sitting there, every night, a little bit of sleep. We went and got our uniforms, our camis. Back then, we were still wearing the tricolor camis. Some of you that are probably listening to this, like, what the heck is that? You're old. No, I'm not old. I am a well-seasoned, salty devil dog. Yes, salty. So we got our tricolor camis, all those things, and put them on. And, they had recruits working down there in the back, passing that stuff over to us and everything. And so they had a bunch of them that were working parties, young sergeants, corporals that worked there at the supply area. And pretty much what they did was they took a look at you. They're like, all right, medium, regular, whatever. And they threw the camis at you, and that's what you had. Same thing with the boots. Now, back then, we didn't have all these little high-tech, cool-looking suede. They gave us a pair of jungle boots and a pair of what they call 4x4s. Okay, they were pretty much almost like the jungle boots, the black leather boots that didn't have any little holes on the side or anything. So they were solid. That is what they gave us. They were the ones that you actually had to polish, and you had to put boot polish on them every single day. Later on, they showed us how to do some other things to the boots and everything once we were further on in the training. But back to the actual receiving process. I don't want to get ahead of myself, because next week we're going to talk a lot about as far as what happened once we actually picked up with our actual platoon. So here we are getting our camis. They gave me 3 sets of the woodland camis, which is all that we had. The desert camis that weren't a thing back then. All we had was the green ones, the brown skivvy shirts. Yes, brown. We didn't have the green ones that we have now here in the current time of the Corps. Our PT gear. We had gray sweatpants, a gray top, gray bottom. Those were our sweatpants. I remember that we had little shorts too. For the life of me, I can't remember what the heck they look like. I know that it wasn't the silkies that we have now, or the actual little green shorts that we wear when we PT, but we had those. We had the gray top, gray bottom, and they actually had us go ahead and put our platoon numbers stenciled on the back of them, so that way those were already done. So when we picked up, we would be ready to go. So we had all our stuff and everything else. The next stop that we had to do was we actually had to go to medical. Well, it wasn't really medical, because they're at receiving. They had it all set up and everything for us, and it was like a meat processing line, no different than what it is now today, that they take you in there. They have those vaccines, that they have that pressurized, I call it a nail gun, because they use air to give you the freaking shot, and it hurts when you put it in there. So you walk in there, psh, 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 left side, right side, getting shots and getting shot after shot, wondering what the heck they're actually putting in you. But hey, you need the stuff and everything to make sure that you have it, so that way when you start training, you're ready to go, and you don't have to really worry about, hopefully you don't get sick while you're there. So once we get all our stuff, we're scheduled to pick up on that Friday. And I remember the day before that, we were down there in our squad bay where they had us, and we were all sleeping over there. And they set us down there towards the front and everything else, and they told us to sit down, so we sat down. And there was another Marine that was sitting there in front of us that came and talked to us. Later on, I came to find out that was our senior drill instructor. Now, for those of you that gone through the recruit training and everything else, if you don't know the name of your drill instructors, something's wrong. Up until this day, I still remember each of my drill instructors. My senior drill instructor was Senior Drill Instructor Staff Sergeant VRL. I had Staff Sergeant Watkins, Staff Sergeant Boggs, and Sergeant Donnelly. I had a 4-hat teams, even till this day, almost 26 years later. I will never forget their faces. I will never forget the things that they were going to teach me or anything. But our senior drill instructor sat us down. He started talking to us. He told us who he was, some of the things that he expected from us, and letting us know that on Friday we were going to meet the rest of our drill instructors that worked for him. Real, solid conversation, man to man. I know for me, I was like, dang, this guy's going to be cool. He's not going to yell at us. He's going to treat us good and everything. And it's going to be hella easy when I get down there on Friday. Come to find out, hey, there's an on and off switch that all drill instructors have. It was a complete different story once we got there and we actually picked up with their company. I'm not going to get into a lot of details with that there when we picked up and everything. So I will actually get into that more next week. Now, this to me was already the beginning of a culture shock, because the majority of the recruits that were there, they felt the exact same way. They were like, what the heck is going on here? Okay, I was assigned to Fox Company, platoon 2045. Yes, that was my platoon. Now, little did I know, I had no idea that the next 13 weeks of my life were going to be the beginning. The actual start was going to be the next 20 years of my life. So again, I'm going to pick this up next week. We're going to start at Black Friday. You know what that is. And you know what to expect, and you know what's coming. So we'll continue on there next week, and we'll pick up on Black Friday now that I'm already at Parris Island, South Carolina, and we will pick it up from there. Until then, this is Gunny Signs wishing you a great Liberty Call.